All right, welcome back to just another solar podcast with Luke Beattie. That's me, Karl Jensen. G'day, Karl.
Luke, I'm freezing. G'day.
Where in the world are you?
I'm in Melbourne, and it's bloody cold here, let me tell you. That 7-degree gift that God gave you over in WA, I'm missing.
There you go. And also joined by industry legend Nigel Morris. G'day, Nige.
G'day, Luke. G'day, Karl. Good to be back. Cold here as well. Just big thunderstorms just rolled in. We've had a tumultuous amount of rain in New South Wales over the last few days. But I don't look as miserable and cold as our friend in his car.
Well, Nigel, you had flooding yesterday. It was all over the news. You're underwater.
Yeah, not where I am, but just down the coast, 265 mil in 24 hours. That's a fairly big dump. And it's been circulating around, and I just looked at the bomb before we came on air, and it looks like it's about to circulate back around over our place by the sounds of the roof.
Yeah, we've got a drought happening here in Victoria. It hasn't rained in ages.
So, Nige, you've had a busy week, though. You've been down in Melbourne and getting around to a few events.
Yeah, well, a busy 6 weeks, in fact, since we announced the merger with Catch Power. I've been on the road pretty much every week for the last 6 weeks almost. I was in Victoria a couple of weeks ago for the Smart Energy Council's Consumer Energy Summit, along with our guest, actually. We'll rib him about his performance on the stage when he comes on air. Also did a show. Catch Power helped organise a show for a bunch of dealers down in Victoria day before yesterday, which was a great little dealer event, and also did a community show. Our local community centre talked a few of us into going along. So had a great day on Sunday, actually talking with Craig Rucastle, their special guest, a bunch of people there for all the info sessions, and then solar companies and electric vehicles, the whole schmozzle. So yeah, really good to just get back into the end user sphere, if you like, and talk to a bunch of owners about the issues that they're all interested in. Of course, everyone wanted to know about the battery rebate.
The New South Wales battery rebate. So there's been a fair bit of criticism there saying that there was a lack of industry consultation. So first of all, the New South Wales government announced it months and months in advance, which we know doesn't work for the industry from past experiences. And the other thing is it seems to be undercooked in how they've structured it too.
Yeah, I actually got I was on a panel at the Consumer Energy Summit, and it was a panel on policy, good policy, bad policy. Well, what does it all look like? And I have to say, shout out to the New South Wales government. You were my example of how to wreck a policy and how to destroy an industry. I did some quick numbers on what the impact of this 6-month delay between the announcement of the battery rebate and when it actually kicks in would be worth. And by my numbers, it makes about a $50 million hole for New South Wales solar businesses. And I didn't pull my punches about, how damaging that is to an industry. It's the last thing we need. Word on the street is there is a lot of pressure being brought to bear on the New South Wales government to sort this out and not hold that $50 million of solar business to ransom. So we've got to stay tuned on that.
People are doing it tough. Everyone's talking about really low margins. That leads have been down, that the conversion time from when you first engage with a prospect to closing a sale has increased. So times are tough. Interestingly, though, Nige, the stats seem to suggest that it's improving.
Yeah, I've heard the same thing, actually, and I bumped into Warwick Johnston down there, and there's a little bit of light. And certainly, as we've said over and over again, I think, diversity and adding value are keys here. There's so much cheap solar out there, and when you dig deep into the stats, it's pretty clear that, the cost of living is kind of encouraging people to go cheaper, it would appear. So, you look at the numbers of who's winning in Victoria, for example, and it's mostly the budget guys, sadly, just dumping ever cheaper solar into the market. So along with many other people, finding other ways, through selling heat pumps or batteries or EV chargers or anything else you can do that adds a bit more value to the system seems to be the only way you're going to be able to make some money out of it. And for what it's worth, talking about EVs, I did the numbers today after seeing some news about the latest EV uptake. And if you divide the number of EVs sold so far this year by the number of days, it's 299 electric vehicles per day being sold, which is about double the number of stationary batteries. So, there's an opportunity there for solar owners, because I'm going to take a punt and say I reckon at least 80% of EV owners have either got solar or want solar. It's the cheapest way to charge that vehicle. You've got to do it. So, if they haven't got it, they're going to get it. So there's about an 80% attachment rate for EV owners, whereas, stationary batteries, it's maybe 30%, 40% if you're doing real well. So huge opportunity in EV charger and electrical infrastructure to get all these EVs charged.
I hear a lot of stuff about the prices of EVs. Today, I was fortunate enough to go with a customer to test drive a new Tesla Model 3 Performance, and I noted that it was $200 more expensive than the Model 3 Performance I bought 2 years ago. So perhaps there's a lot of media hype there that's not true. And certainly the guys at the showroom said that Channel 9 show where they had 2,000 cars on the dock, they said, yeah, they're all sold and we'd love to get more of them.
There you go.
I just don't know why the agenda is anti-EVs, because we all know that they're better.
I think we'll bring our guest in at this point. I don't feel that our guest today needs an introduction. Very well known in the industry as a trainer, as a media person, consulting to industry, consulting to standards, technically one of the best minds in the industry, and an all-round great bloke. So we've got Glen Morris from the Smart Energy Lab. G'day, Glen.
G'day, Luke. Thanks for that intro.
It's great to have you on. There's a lot going on. I thought we might just jump into a few topics. So you're just getting ready to go to SNEC, which is one of the largest trade shows for the industry in Shanghai. What are you doing over there?
Yeah, well, for those who don't know, SNEC, Shanghai New Energy Conference, it's huge. 500,000 people attend. It makes Intersolar look like a little sideshow, but it is very Chinese focused. So it's a showcase of Chinese technology, you could say, and it's huge in terms of size. There's 3,500 booths this year, and the booths are huge. Some of them are like small towns, with rooms that you go through. It's really loud. That's the thing that kind of got me. It's like going to a nightclub, but everyone's playing a different tune.
Oh, really? Wow.
And so what advice would you give for first-time goers to SNEC? How do you get the most value out of it when you've got so much to see?
Strategic. So there is, I think, 20 pavilions, something like that. So pick your key exhibits you want to go and see, find out where the pavilions are, get a map, work out the shortest path between them all. There's even a train that takes you around it. It's such a big site. There's a little sort of, road train with wheels, not a track train. So, yeah, a lot of walking. Good shoes. Don't be hungover from the night before. You're going to need to be a performance athlete to get around that show.
Wow. Glen, I've thought about going to SNEC a few times, and I've always sort of thought, am I going to see anything there or learn anything there that is of value to me that I can bring back home? Yeah, what's the experience like in that sense?
Well, it's where a lot of companies launch their products. So,
right.
I've got a few launches that I'm going to. If you want to see something first, and particularly if it's made in China, you'll see it at SNEC.
And you'll be doing a lot of media over there. So for anyone who hasn't checked out your channels, particularly YouTube, Smart Energy Lab, check it out. There's videos about everything from products to technical talks. And so what's your plan over there? Are you booked for certain products and launches and companies, or do you just go there and freelance?
A bit of both, actually. So I've been very fortunate where I've had companies actually host my trip. So full disclosure, it didn't cost me a cent to go. So I do, do some promotion around their products, but I'm sort of a free agent. So I go and see everyone and interview as many as I can and make short little, booth interviews talking about the products that are new and exciting. So, yeah, it's kind of a rich experience. I'm also doing some stuff for the Smart Energy Council. So I'm on a panel with John Grimes and Rami, and who else is on there?
Anastasia Palaszczuk.
Anastasia, yes, that's right. So the four of us. So I think I'm talking on standards, funnily enough.
Well, let's use that as a segue then. So the AS4777 standards went out for public comment. I imagine they're being crafted and finalised before they're published. How long is it going to be until we see the new inverter standards, and what can we expect to be different there?
Yeah, it's always a little bit of an unknown, but I imagine this year we'll see it published. I mean, there's sort of a few hiccups sometimes in the drafting process and the balloting, but I think we're ready to roll with them. It's 4777 Part 2, for those not familiar with the numbering, is the test standard, and Part 1 is the installation standard. Pretty excited about Part 1 finally, the big news. Hold your breath, everyone. 1,000 volts for Resi. Woo!
Yeah.
And if you're doing CNI stuff, secondary protection goes up to 200 kVA. None of these little 30 kVA systems, right, with secondary protection. So 200 kVA. Of course, still in the purview of the DNSP, they might go, well, bugger you, you're still going to have to put in secondary protection, but let's hope not. What else? We got a whole plethora of new supply names. This is going to really piss off, excuse the French, label makers. They're going to have to redo all their labels. So, we used to have main supply or grid supply or inverter supply. Now we've got prescribed names with very clear definitions. I'll run you through them. Supplementary, substitute, normal, island, alternative. They're all different types of supply which you have to label main switches with now. Well, when it's published.
That sounds like a lot of opportunity for mistakes, Glenn.
Yep, inspectors will love it. Oh, no, you can't use those signs. They're old ones.
And while we're on compliance, we were talking about in previous episodes that there's new standards coming into Victoria and Queensland in line with South Australia. So the inverters need to have a CSIP requirement. Can you explain simply to people about what the changes are in those requirements?
Yeah, so I thought I'd do a little bit of prep on this, even though I kind of know what CSIP is, so I just typed it into Google. And funnily enough, I'd just done my JP training, and it came up with the Court Integrated Service Program in Victoria, which is called CSIP as well. So in the inverter world, it's actually about making inverters behave as part of the team. You could say as part of Grid 2.0, that they do the right thing. Things like export limiting, grid import control, whether connect or disconnect, monitoring of their key data and alarms, the status of their output, limiting maximum active power, and also none of those settings can be changed by comms remotely. So it's kind of lock them in. So you can't just go and get a password and turn off all those features.
So do you see the rest of the states and DNSPs are going to adopt similar requirements?
I'm sure they will. I guess it's just, the first one puts their toe in the water, South Australia, because they had to, and others will follow, because we've got this problem, the duck curve of energy versus the massive pyramid of solar, rooftop solar, and how do you control that?
Well, it turns out they've solved it. I hear the Californian grid has been entirely renewable now for 60-something days, and they're solving it with batteries, which is pretty exciting.
Yep, that's the way.
I do notice the gas lobbies out there. I've seen TV ads and radio ads basically saying, it's great we've got renewables, but we can only do this with Australian natural gas. So I think California shows that it's not necessarily the case, Karl.
Oh, and I saw one, Rinnai got an award for a hydrogen-powered gas water heater, which I thought was hilarious, given that there's no hydrogen gas around. That's a great one.
And Glenn, you're Victorian based. What do you know about the impending CSIP or backstop mechanism that's supposed to land on July 1? There was a lot of discussion about this at SEER, and we see that the regulatory body have put out a statement saying they're reviewing the July 1 date. Do you have anything on your radar that you know about whether that date's going to change or not?
I'm afraid not. In fact, the grid side of things are a bit of foreign to me because I live off grid, and all that seems kind of just academic.
We certainly talked about it a lot, and what we found out, I think we maybe mentioned this in the last episode, but SEER, at SEER, 3 DNSPs declared that they just weren't ready, and they hadn't built the systems out to enable the admin side of it to happen, so they were asking for a delay to October. We are hearing the whole thing may be pushed out to October, but it's inevitable. And so, whether it's in July or whether it's in October, it's incumbent on everyone who installs grid-connected solar to understand what the requirements are. It was mostly around connectivity and the ability to register devices and enable them to be tested to show that they could be turned off in the event of an emergency. And then, of course, the following step after that will be, okay, now you can choose dynamic control instead, which enables consumers to continue to generate. Out of interest in Queensland, so we've got dynamic generation controls in place or coming in several states, and in Queensland, the first dynamic load controlled product was approved just the other week, which was Catch Power. in conjunction with the Fronius Watt pilot. So we're now doing the same thing, but dynamically controlling load and generation and charge into vehicles in the same way. And it seems that that's the way the industry is going.
Yeah, well, that's great news, Nigel. Obviously, the rules for connecting EV chargers in Queensland have been somewhat problematic so far. So the fact that we've got those technologies available now with Catch Power and Fronius is awesome.
Yeah, we actually were pretty excitedly running around the office the other day going, look at that. We're talking to EV chargers remotely and seeing and sending signals. So it was kind of cool to see. It's early days. And of course, it's a bit of a betting game here when you go, well, how likely? Yeah, the alternative is essentially a ripple controller, which just turns the whole thing off if the network decides they need to. And it's a bit speculative about how frequently that might happen. But one thing's for sure. If more solar goes in and more EVs go in, it's going to happen more often. And that knife switch approach it's kind of like a static export limit, right? It's just a blunt instrument approach to a potential problem, which is pretty dumb. So it's great. And I know there's a bunch of other providers who are rapidly getting their technology ready to allow that to happen as well.
Are we leading the world here, Nigel?
That's a really good question, Karl, and I reckon we probably are. I actually was chatting to someone this morning in a meeting and saying, actually, this could be a world first. I don't know that there is dynamic load control requirements at mass scale in a network the size of Queensland. I don't know that exists anywhere else in the world.
Yeah, I look at a lot of these technologies that are being invented here in Australia for problems that I didn't think existed. But of course, as you say, we're early days. What are the other countries doing? Maybe Glen will be able to see some of this stuff at SNEC.
Actually, I was just thinking back probably 15 years ago, Germany introduced frequency shift for controlling generation, and then companies started making frequency shift load control to mimic in reverse what was happening to generation.
There you go.
Yeah, it's not new.
No, it's only the way it's being done, I think, which is a little bit different. But of course, we've had ripple control, which is effectively a form of it. But the difference, of course, is getting it. And tell me, Glen, was that stuff connected to? Was the frequency shifting allowing you to follow generation and load at the same time?
They work in opposite directions. So I actually use that here on my microgrid, the same system that Germany used, which is when there is too much generation for the amount of storage, then the frequency very slightly is raised on the microgrid, and all 4777 inverters will invert their power, so they'll reduce their power proportionally. And I've got several load control systems, including some catch solar relays with frequency triggers, which are really good. And they just turn loads on. So they effectively soak up the surplus rather than curtailing it.
I went to a summit, get together in Ballarat the other day where they're talking about making Ballarat its own microgrid. And obviously, I think that the grid's a pretty good thing, and if you've got some spare energy, you can share it with other people. And building giant microgrids is perhaps ill-conceived. What do you think, Glen?
Yeah, I mean, I call myself the accidental microgrid because it just grew out of having too much equipment and needing to test it. So we've now got 7 homes, 9 EV chargers, 2 community buildings, 7 labs, and a whole bunch of hot water services all on the microgrid, as well as about 30 inverters.
Yeah, so also up there, you're doing lots of testing, unboxing, you do media, but also people send you stuff from all over the place. What are some of the products and solutions you've seen recently that stand out?
Yeah, I made a bit of a list, sort of a bit of everything, really. One of the services I offer, because I'm closely tied to the development of standards, I can give a little overview of a product in terms of its compliance. Certainly from an installation point of view, not 4777 Part 2 testing, but when you go to install this product, what's the inspector going to say? One of my favourite ones at the moment is the lack of mechanical protection on LV battery cables. It has always been a requirement in 5139, but a lot of companies just think, it's double insulated cable. What does that matter? Why do we have to put mechanical protection? But anyway, getting back to new products, the really exciting one, and I keep banging on about it, I'm not being paid to say this, but is SIG Energy. It really has been a game changer for me to find a product that does everything. I mean, I'm putting one on the side of my house at the moment. It's basically a really excellent energy storage system with a hybrid inverter with a 25 kilowatt DC charger, really cool app and smart energy management built in. And it's so fast to install. I posted yesterday, me and Anne, my Sparky, it took us 2 hours to assemble the whole thing and bolt it to the wall. We didn't run the DC or the AC, but basically it looks finished. 2 hours. And that's 32 kilowatt hours of storage, 10 kilowatt three-phase. And the DC charger, 25 kilowatt DC charger for your home. You'll charge that electric bike pretty quick there, Nige.
25 kilowatts is a dream for me, mate. That's spot on for my Harley. I happened to stumble across a guy in the UK who'd done an install last night, actually, and watched him go right through the install. And yeah, it's a mighty impressive solution. He was raving as much as anything about the beauty of the commissioning side once he got it all installed. How quickly it commissioned and tested and went through a diagnostic test. And, I think this is absolutely the future of where this tech needs to be. And I'm interested. I'm equally impressed with what I'm seeing with the SIG Energy product, but I've also been learning a bit more. I've been watching and keep hassling the XS guys, XARL, who have got a really nice modular system, somewhat similar, different target audience, more off-grid. They're almost ready for production. It's a really cool looking product. And I've been learning a bit more about the Franklin product as well, which is a sort of more a sort of direct competitor for a Powerwall, a late model Powerwall, if you like. It's mind blowing to see how far this tech has come in the last few years. Where do we go next, Glenn? After we've got this stuff going, where's the room left to improve? You played with these things. There's still opportunity, I'm guessing.
Yeah. Hey, we'll backtrack a little bit. So I know Jordan, he's a mate. We chat a bit from Artisan Electric. That's the video that you were watching. So anyone who's looking to see that, just look up Artisan Electric in the UK. He did a great little presentation, and he's right about the commissioning process. AI is in their DNA. This company has roots in AI. So it's not just one of those buzzwords you throw out.
I believe the founders, a lot of them came from Huawei.
Yeah, you got to be careful about saying that because, of course, don't upset the Huawei people. But Tony.
But that's credibility. In the wider world and Five Eyes countries, there's been negative media and there's all that sort of thing. But in the other countries, non-Five Eyes and Western countries, Huawei is considered like an Apple. You go to China and that's their Apple, and they're a massive technology company. And they're very far advanced too. So as much as, we take on board little bits of things that have been in the media in Australia, when you look globally, they're just shooting ahead very quickly, particularly in the AI space. So if the guys have come from there, in my opinion, that's actually credibility.
Well, the founder of SIG Energy, Tony Zhu, he was head of Huawei's AI and solar division for 20 years. So, basically, they lost a big guy there. And so he starts his own company 2 years ago and is now producing a world-beating product with a great team. It's just amazing. But you did ask me about a few others, so I just mentioned a few others. Weco, an Italian battery. What I like about this is it's a dual voltage battery. That means it can be connected in series for high voltage or parallel for extra low voltage. So it's a pretty flexible product. Sodium ion. I reckon that's the next big thing. Well, in parallel with lithium ion, sodium ion's coming up fast. So Feridian from the UK, I've got an R&D unit here. Sodium it's just a cheaper product because it's not as expensive as lithium. It's not resource scarce. It's seawater, is where you get your sodium from. But done a few unboxings and installs for companies like Fox ESS, which is a company who I visited their factory in China a few years ago, before COVID locked everything up. That was pretty impressive. A factory where a kilometre-long production line where minerals go on one end and batteries come out the other, and there's only 40 people running this thing. They're all robot engineers. Wow. The whole thing's robot-controlled. So, and I remember saying, why so few people, or why so many robots? Wouldn't labour be cheaper? They said, no, labour's not cheap now. You've got to employ the best, and they're expensive in China. A small startup called Solentech who make big hybrids. I've got one of their 20 kilowatt hybrids, which looks about the size of a 5 kilowatt grid tie inverter, but it's a 20 kilowatt hybrid. They do 50s. I think they're going to do 100s. They can parallel their EPS ports to get really big power out of multiples. That's pretty cool. And of course, on the Australian front, I just love Runner. I love the hat, but it's just a really cool product, especially that self-healing. Leave the can in the van. I love the catch tie from Runner. And of course, Clenergy. We're doing a project here for, we're setting up a solar panel testing facility at the Smart Energy Lab for a company called P-Vision. And Clenergy donated all the mounting equipment. And my installer, who wasn't using Clenergy products, has switched. He said, "Mate, this is so easy. These new clips they got with the weave built in and spring loaded, and they don't fall out and end up in the gutter." So Clenergy win once again. So there's my little hit pick for the week.
That's awesome. And Luke, you've been using those clips now for what, 4 years?
Yeah, the universal ones. And I've also been involved in, I think, 4 working groups with Clenergy. So Glen, I know you've been involved too. And I know that they're constantly consulting with industry and trying to improve what they have. Now, that comes from a lot of respected installers and engineers and importers and partners. And some of the products that have been developed, I've been in working groups where they had the genesis. And it's really cool to see that they listen, they get their engineers onto it, they bring the prototypes or the ideas, it gets fleshed out. Some of the stuff they go through and bring to market, some of it they don't. But I think the really interesting link there is that they're engaging with Australian industry to modify solutions, to come up with new ones, rather than just having an R&D facility in China or wherever in the world, and it doesn't have that connection to the industry. So I think coming back to what you were saying about Runner and the other Clenergy products, I think that's one of their real advantages, that there's people that you're in the industry with, they could be a colleague, they could be a competitor, but there's a whole brains trust there that's feeding into their development. I think it's a really cool approach. Moving on, Glen, you've got Solar Plus as well, which is all about quoting, and I got to have a play with a different platform today, and it's all about electrification. So people can put their bills in, they can swap out and they can say, yes, I have solar, no, I don't. What do I have that's gas, and so on. And you can select what you want to change out, and it's going to tell you what the payback period will be on that, what the savings are, both in carbon emissions and in dollars. And there's a few other platforms like that that are coming out. So you're obviously involved in these sort of platforms. So what are you currently doing, but also what are some of the cool frontiers that you're seeing in that space?
Yeah, a little bit of backstory. So Laurie Kane and I started Solar Plus as a joint venture with what was then called the Solar Council, now the Smart Energy Council. It was a joint venture. So we're in 2010 we started. Basically, we've produced what I would describe as a pro tool for anyone involved in the solar industry, whether you're at the beginning in terms of custom acquisition, whether you're the person who designs roof layouts and does the electricals, whether you're the installer who has to install and commission and record that. And all of this is being tracked. So, if you've got the boss wanting to see how the whole system is working, they can see who's doing what, where, what the progresses are, and documentation. We also do off-grid, which is a little bit of a niche. I pushed really hard for that because that's kind of in my DNA. And so, yeah, it's a very good off-grid design tool.
Some of these platforms, including your own, are just coming out with features that, you compare it to even 6-7 years ago, what the quoting tools were. And now you look at it where it does string design, it does all the considerations that you can think of. I still go back to when I joined the industry, and it was actually with Karl, and we were doing, commercial design or ground mount system. You'd have to pull out all the charts, do all the calculations, string design, you're doing it all manually and calculating it. Whereas now there's these tools that do it automatically for people. So you can take a layman, teach them how to use the tool. And in most cases, they're going to be able to design a compliant and optimal system for customers. So I find that really cool. I love seeing the different technology. When I'm at trade shows or get the opportunity, I'll always spend time with those companies, including your own. And so there's all these other cool tools out there. I know they're your competitors, but just seeing how fast it's going ahead and how it's grabbing a bigger picture of the market. So it's not just solar and or batteries now. You're seeing platforms that are integrating all different solutions and full electrification. So cool.
Yeah, I mean, you just told the story of why we developed Solar Plus, because we used to do what you did. Me and Laurie in the office, he was there with his calculator and spreadsheet and data sheets, and it was a very hit and miss and slow process. Now it's drag and drop, literally you just outline the solar farm, drag and drop your panels in there, press string it, and then it strings it. It's like, whoa.
Look,
How's-
we were pioneers back in the day, mate, and we figured out the cookie cutter approach. It was just, this is what you need, and this is how you need to plug it together. It might have been more difficult, but we did crack out the same thing over and over again a lot.
I just remember you'd spend half your day explaining to customers why oversizing PV on inverters was a good thing to do. Because at that time, I remember there were crazy feed-in tariffs. There was the multiplier, and you had the opposite. So people would get a bulk deal on 5 kilowatt inverters and sell 2.5 kilowatt PV upgradable systems. And Karl would be there saying, you need to put 6.5 kilowatts on your 5 kilowatt inverter, and would argue till he's black and blue. And it was funny, the resistance
10.
in the industry there.
10, that was the right number. 10.
Yeah. So all that resistance coming back, whereas now it's commonplace.
Yep, there's a lot of lessons to be learned, and it's funny when people roll their eyes when you go, I've been doing this for 20 or 30 years or whatever it is, and you go, boy, we've learned a lot of lessons the hard way.
Yeah, I still think we're leading the world. Obviously great to see California is 100% renewable for the last 75 days, but I don't think that they have the network that we have. It's all parked out and in the desert, and theirs is essentially a similar model to coal-fired generation, except their solar panels hundreds of kilometres away from where people are using it, whereas ours is distributed amongst the grid, which I think is better. Oh, we were talking before we started the show, Nigel. New solar farm online in China, being the largest in the world at 200,000 hectares or acres.
Acres. I think it was acres. Yeah.
It's acres, 200,000 acres. I'll just look at the article now.
Mind-boggling. I saw there was some figure that I saw quoted about how many electric vehicles that you could charge off that one power system, and it was just, mind-boggling size, right?
Yeah, it was big enough to power all of India, and obviously in Australia you've got the naysayers that China's building coal-fired power station every week. I think the number quoted was that they'd installed 240 gigawatts. Let me fact check that in a second. It was 216 gigawatts of solar China installed last year. I think Australia installed a bit over 4.
Just solar, not
Just
even the
solar.
wind. And I saw something about there's a huge hydro that they're building in China at the moment as well, which is going to make the Three Gorges look like a puppy.
They're really, really good. Well, Luke and I noticed on our trip to China, they're really, really good at pouring concrete. There's no doubt about that.
And transmission, Karl.
Transmission. Yeah. Like we can shift some power, but now we know exactly why they need to. Turns out, that solar farm's in the desert where no one wants to live, and the land's otherwise useless. But you've got to shift the power a couple of thousand kilometres to get it to the population.
So similar theory to, say, the Sun Cable project. Hey, Glenn, what's your thoughts on something like Sun Cable?
Well, it sounds like a great solution to having too much solar. We are one of the most solar-friendly nations in terms of how popular it is, but also the resource we have. I think apart from Saudi Arabia, the Gobi Desert, in the middle of the Pacific Ocean where no one lives, we're it. We've got a huge continental-sized island in a really great zone for solar. So, yeah, being able to export that energy to countries like Singapore and beyond would be, much better than pumping oil or gas.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting thing. That 200,000 acres was further south or further north in latitude than Melbourne is south, and we know that the solar resource gets better as you go further north. So, obviously, it makes a hell of a lot of sense to put solar panels close to Singapore because a lot of sun near the equator.
Yeah, also inland Australia is away from the cloud banks of the coastal area, so you get just clear skies.
And Glenn, you're also involved in the training space.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. So I've been, in solar training since 2007, mostly back then at TAFEs and technical colleges. But more and more, I'm doing a diversity of stuff. New Zealand seems to be the hot spot for me at the moment. I go there every couple of months to run a course or two for solar installers because New Zealand's playing catch up with Australia. Not to be rude, they're about 10 to 15 years behind us. They haven't had any incentives, so it's just got to pay for itself. It's not as sunny as Australia, and people sort of, a little bit more cautious about how useful solar would be, particularly, we're in the South Island. But when they see the price of electricity, which is, climbing up as it is in Australia, and solar is getting so cheap, the two are crossing over. And so suddenly solar makes financial sense in New Zealand, but there isn't any accreditation nor there's 1 or 2 training courses in the whole of New Zealand. So yeah, that's been my main focus, is helping to bring up the skill level there. I also do bespoke courses for companies. They just tell me what they want. It might be just design only. It might be compliance training for companies that have got a bunch of electricians who haven't been there at technical college in 20 years, but they're now doing renewables. So yeah, it's fun.
Well, I'm intrigued with New Zealand, Glenn, because it's a few years since I've been over there, but there was always some real cool innovation going on over there. There was a number of companies doing PPAs very early. They had a huge off-grid history, especially out in the islands and stuff. And the last time I was over there, I was blown away at the attachment of batteries. And everyone sort of said to me, look, solar makes no sense. So if you're going to do it, why wouldn't you just slap a battery in as well? Doesn't make any more sense, but, people want it. It was about independence. Are their battery attachment rates still really high over there?
I don't know the numbers, but you're right. There is some very innovative approaches. There's a company called Solar Zero who does a zero-cost solar with batteries. It's a 20-year PPA. So effectively, they're using your battery and selling onto the wholesale market, but you get to use most of it, and it doesn't cost you a cent. That's a pretty good model. It's very, very popular. But I'd say commercial is strong too, because it's where it really matches the solar cycle. You turn the lights on at the beginning of the day and you turn them off at the end of the day and go home. And also any 7-day-a-week businesses, retirement villages, they're just gold. They never stop using power 365 days of the year.
Aren't they still working off one of the older AS 5033 install standards? I thought it was 2012 they're still working off. Is that right?
Yes. So New Zealand has a different approach. Standards have to be referenced through government regulation, and the regs haven't been updated for over a decade. It's not just, they don't update them piecemeal, they have to update the regs for 300 standards at one go, which means they have to be convinced that all 300 standards are ready to ratify and then update them. But it's actually a political problem. I've even lobbied the minister personally. Yeah, and I said, can you do something about this? Because they're in a bizarre situation in New Zealand where products that have been around for a long time aren't even acknowledged in the standards, like DCUs, optimizers. Technically, you would have to put a DC isolator on the front of every optimizer on the input. 350 watt rule for microinverters. You can't buy panels that small. It goes on and on. So yeah, it's a really challenging environment, and so there's a little bit of how would I put it? People just ignore it a little bit. Don't ask, don't tell.
And in Australia, we're moving more towards international standards. Is that right? The IEC standards, as opposed to having to put everything through the AS? Well,
actually, Australia was the first country to produce a PV-array standard, 5033, and it was adopted by the IEC, because Ted Spooner, our rep on that committee, IEC 62548 is the international standard for PV installations, which is based on 5033. So once again, Australia led the world in standards development. But you're right, we're trying to avoid duplication. So if there is an IEC standard we can reference rather than try to write some text around it, an Australian standard, we do. And we do what's called parallel adoption as well, where it'll get a dual moniker. It'll be an AS, IEC, and then a long number standard. Yeah, one more on training. So I'm really pleased to see that training is now available for non-electricians, and we're seeing companies like New Energy Training and GSES providing courses for technical staff, for sales staff, and based on actual units of competency. So things like solar and battery sales professional, solar and battery essentials. Conduct a site survey for grid-connected photovoltaic and battery storage systems. So we're taking to acknowledge that solar install is more than just the electrical work. It's all the ancillary people as well.
I think there was 90 million in the federal budget for training for renewable energy people, wasn't there?
Yeah, I think it was, and I've heard it mentioned numerous times that various different apprenticeships can get extra funding if you choose a renewable energy based trade.
Yeah, well, 90 million you'd think would go a long way, and obviously we still have a skills shortage in our industry. It might not feel like it at the moment because people are a little bit on the slow side. But when we look at historical this time of the year, it's always crap this time of year, and the next 4 or 5 months are boom time. So let's cross our fingers that hope it happens again.
Now, we're going to have to wrap up shortly, Glenn. I just wanted to ask you, what's ahead for you in the coming year?
More trips overseas. Unfortunately, companies want me to make videos these days. So, I've been to Belgium to make a video for C+T. I've been to China several times. So I've got a few trips up my sleeve. More unboxings. It's kind of a joke, really, isn't it? Like, people like you to watch you open a box and take the stuff out. But I like to call it a visual data sheet. So I'm effectively telling people about the product. I'm not giving a review. I'm not saying it's good or bad because I don't even get to use it sometimes. Just take it out of the box and go, oh, it's got 2 MPPTs. Woo! That's kind of what's on the agenda for me.
But I noticed you get tens of thousands of views for some of them too. So it must be international. I'm sure
yes.
There's a good Australian base, but it'd go far and wide, surely.
I'm big in Indonesia and India too for some reason.
You should get that shirt made up. I'm actually a big deal in Indonesia. I think Karl was a big deal over there after his last trip to Bali.
It's funny. Like, I started off as an installer installing solar, but now I'm an influencer. So I put on my, when I'm coming into the country, what's your occupation?
Where is the gold chain, Glenn?
Oh, DJ Glenmo's taking a rest today. It's just hanging up here somewhere.
All right, so we do need to wrap up. I'll just do a quick whip around, guys. Last comments, and we'll start with Nigel.
More of the same for us. We're sort of deep in getting ready to launch a couple of new things. Got a couple of things out last week, and I'm drowning in understanding. When you can orchestrate many things all at once, your world suddenly gets really, really, really complicated, really, really fast. So I'm having a great time learning all about that and trying to translate that into stuff that normal humans can understand.
And Karl.
I'm just going to say thanks to all of our loyal iStore customers in the heat pump space. So whilst solar's been slow for this time of year, as soon as it gets cold, people's hot water services break, and the team in-house has been incredible. Of course, we're in the process of launching a new model, which is now available in Victoria, not yet in the other states. As per usual, everybody knows that nothing's ever easy. Getting all the boxes ticked with the various, approvals and rebates and so on, has had a lot of people lose a fair bit of hair. So big shout out to everyone who's supporting us through that and who's chipped in and done the work.
Thanks to Glen Morris from the Smart Energy Lab. Great to have you on again and to get an update of what's going on. Last comments from you.
I love my iStore. It's about 5 years old now. Never skips a beat, and I love the solar-centric software features for it. So, yeah, good one.
Yeah, and you could even consider getting the fully wrapped solution with the inverters, batteries, and all the other products that are upcoming. I think that's the first time I've done a personal advertisement on the podcast. So, surely, listeners, forgive us. All right, well, thanks, Glenn, Karl, Nigel, and thanks to you, the listeners. Just remember to follow us on socials, share around anything that's relevant, and we'll catch you next time.